Disclaimer: the views expressed on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek are solely the opinions of the host and the guest. The content of the conversation is not reflective of the institutions or establishments mentioned therein. Take all these opinions with a pinch of salt and a dash of lime if needed. Namaskara, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening, and welcome to this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. My guest this week is Desmond Lee. Desmond and I, like most of my guests so far, met through the University of Central Oklahoma. And in this episode, we cover a bit about his choice of moving here and studying here. We also spoke about quite a few other random topics like the moon landing, aliens, and conspiracy theories. So, if you're wanting to know what our beliefs are about those topics, make sure to listen to this episode until the end. Without further ado, I present to you Desmond Lee on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. Hey Desmond, how's it going?
Hey, Prateek, I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. I'm doing good. Before we get started, let the people know who you are, what some of your likes are, some of your dislikes, interests, aspirations, whatever you're willing to share.
Okay. I'm Desmond, uh, and I'm a forensic science and biomedical science major. My likes are gaming, and I like to watch cooking videos. Um, and I also like cats. I prefer cats over dogs. I'll put it out there. Um, Dislikes. Mm, I can't think of any right now, but I know there are definitely some. It's just that on top of my head, I couldn't think of any. Mm, and yeah,
What is the first thing that came to your mind when I say the word dislike?
dislike. Uh, Probably stinky tofu is one of the few food items that I do not like. I'll put it out there.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay, cool, cool. Any future aspirations or sort of anything else that you're willing to add?
Um, I'm right now. I just want to become a DNA analyst, so I could help
Hmm.
people um, either help people find their parents through relationship testing, or
Hmm.
just help criminal investigations and handling evidence, stuff like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. To make this seem more authentic and not like we're putting a face on, Desmond and I both study at UCO. Well, I used to study at UCO until I graduated, but
Hmm.
yeah, we're both in the same forensic science program. He studies biology, and I studied chemistry. Sometimes I feel like I'm still in college. At least that's how I tend to talk sometimes. But anyway, uh, uh,
I
what
think
got you
you're
into?
just acting.
What?
Sorry, I was just saying.
Oh,
I
go
think
ahead.
you're acting that way because you. Uh, I think you're acting that way because you literally just graduated. So.
Yeah, probably so. Probably so, because I'm still not entirely used to it. Because I do think about it
Hmm.
sometimes. I'm like, have I actually graduated? But yeah, no, I have. Anyway, this is not about me. This is about you. Moving on. What got you interested in forensic science and wanting to study DNA and like wanting to study biology?
Hmm. Um. So I'll start with forensic science. Um. being being an Asian, you I'm pretty sure everyone knows the typical Asian stereotypical career pathways. You're either a doctor, you're either a lawyer or engineer, not, nothing else. And I wanted to
Hmm.
do something that I'm interested in, but not those three. uh,
Mm,
career choices. I just thought that one, it's too
mm,
mainstream. Two, if if everyone's gonna go for those three jobs, I'm gonna be struggling. Like I'm gonna have to fight for it. It's too much work for me.
mm.
And um,
Right.
the other thing is the other thing is I watch a lot of CSI when I was young, when I was very young. So that got me into forensics because I'm interested in, on CSI you have the investigators just going on to the crime scene and then like, this guy did this, and this criminal, he probably done that, he's done this, and I've gotten really interested in that. So that's why I'm in forensic science. But I don't I didn't think of go
Mm,
becoming an investigator because I'm more interested in the science of it, particularly biology.
mm,
Um, Actually, at first I wanted to become a medical examiner, but then later on in college I found out that you have to actually go to medical school to actually learn how to do the dissections and stuff like that. And then I'm like, no, I'm too broke for that. My parents can only afford to uh,
mm,
pay for my bachelor's degree, and everything else after that, they're like, it's on you. We ain't paying no more for your
mm.
education. So
Right.
um, at one point, I talked to my advisor, and then she's like, "You can also become a DNA analyst if you want to." And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool." So that's how I got into DNA analysis. Um, and I'm hoping that I
Mm,
could work as a DNA analyst. If not, anything biology related would be just fine with me. Yeah, there's that.
mm. For those of them listening or watching who are not aware, would you like to differentiate between the two? What a medical examiner is, and what a DNA analyst
Oh,
is from your perspective?
from my this is only my opinion. There, um, an actual medical examiner or DNA analyst might thought it's not correct, but this is just my perspective. So for me, a medical examiner is the person who works at the morgue, and when dead bodies come in, they dissect the body, and then they figure out what went wrong. That they figure out what caused this person to die. So, um, may you probably have seen a few scenes on CSI where they go to a morgue and you have this person wearing a scientist jacket, like white jacket, and then explain to the investigator how this person died. So if a person got stabbed in like the liver, and they would be able to tell how this person died, basically. As for a DNA analyst, my
Mm,
a DNA analyst basically analyzes evidence that potentially have DNA evidence on them. So, say I was the I'm the murderer, and I used a knife, like a knife, to stab someone. My DNA would be potentially on the knife handle. So, a DNA analyst would analyze the DNA that's deposited on that knife handle.
mm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, for some people, I think back home they tend to call it autopsies. Um, Maybe they
Yes.
use the same term here too,
Autopsies.
but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they do autopsies.
yeah,
I forgot what the word for it was, but yes, autopsies. So autopsies for medical examiners
yeah.
and DNA analysts. We're just looking at the DNA.
Hmm. So what about, I mean, when the advisor sort of introduced you to the idea of possibly being a DNA analyst, what about it did you find to sort of intrigue you, or what about it made you feel curious towards, like, pursuing that?
Um,
or possibly pursuing that?
yeah. Um, that was when I was in my sophomore year, and um, I was at a point where I'm just lost at, like, I want to do something related to science, and I'm wanting to do forensics, but there's
Hmm.
so many fields in forensics. You got like toxicology, you got chemistry, you got uh, you got bombs. I forgot what the technical term for bombs were, and then you got firearms. And then I'm just here wanting to do something in biology, but there's even in biology, there's like so many different subfields. Um, what got me intrigued about DNA analysis is that on CSI, when even in real life, when people talk about DNA evidence, they're like, oh, for sure, 100%. If you get the DNA evidence, you're dead. That's how damning the evidence would be.
Right.
So that's what got me kind of interested in DNA analysis. I wanted to know what the reason to that evidence being damning is, if that makes sense. Like, what makes it so
Hmm.
damning compared to the other evidence, such as firearms? Because you can have a
Right.
firearm evidence,
Hmm.
but if you have a DNA evidence, you're like you win the game. That basically, um, and you've seen there's some of you may have seen news about um, wrongly convicted wrongly convicted felonies that got out of death row because of DNA evidence. Um, so
Hmm.
that's kind of what got me interested in the first place. I just wanted to um, help people wherever I can with DNA analysis because it's just that um, strong of an evidence, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, the uniqueness of DNA plays a major role in that, right? In terms of how damning it can be,
Hmm.
in terms of the type of evidence that it is.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know what else to add to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought you were gonna add something there. My apologies.
No,
No
no, no,
worries.
no, no.
No worries. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, because DNA by itself is very unique, right? But with DNA also, there's a ton of challenges that come with it because it's it's very hard to sort of now I'm losing forensic science terms. Geez, uh,
Yeah,
it's
I
hard to
know.
sort of find on a crime scene. uh, yeah, it's sort of hard to find it. It's sort of hard to preserve DNA evidence if it's on fingerprints, for example,
It
because
is
they're latent
actually.
prints. They tend to, yeah. What is the word called? Geez, what there is a word, right, for like tire tracks and fingerprints and all those sort of things um,
I think it was called latent prints,
that have
if
a
I
very
remember
small
correctly.
window.
The very small window.
Okay.
Eh, I even I don't even remember the term. This is bad.
Yeah, I guess our minds are just, yeah, they're all the words are not sticking in. But anyway, like the
Yeah,
fact that you can find DNA, something so minuscule that can lead to so many things. It's just fascinating. Like even for somebody who, like for me personally, before I chose forensic science as an option, it was between chemistry and bio for me too. And the reason why I didn't choose bio is because I wasn't really a fan of like DNA and all that sort of stuff. But
hmm,
this entire idea of DNA, it still fascinates me because it's the
yeah,
sort of things that you can do with it. And yeah, now with
yeah.
things like ancestry.com, where they can connect you to like
Oh
your
yeah,
ancestors, or at least, yeah, figure those things out. It's just fascinating what is possible with DNA. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's really crazy.
it
Uh,
is.
but you mentioned something really interesting about. Oh, were you gonna add something to that?
Um, I was just when you said DNA evidence is very fascinating to you. I just thought of how it fascinated me in the way that um, I've I've done multiple DNA classes where I had to like uh, do like sampling and basically handling this tiny amount of DNA that you get. It always
Mm,
fascinates me that the amount of DNA is like literally this tiny, and you can just get so many information out of it. That's what fascinates me. Um, they call it. There's probably like what 5 microliters, which is like a very. It's like
mm,
a just a drop of water. Like you almost couldn't
right.
see it, and yeah, until
Mm,
today, that still fascinates me of what we've come to today. Yeah.
yeah. In terms of technology and what it can do, right? Yeah, it's mind blowing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, you mentioned something interesting about the reason behind you picking forensic science, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but my reasons are also something similar. Like I didn't want to do medicine or do engineering, so like sort of touching on that aspect of Asian culture and why we're so hell bent on doing those three things, being either a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer. Um, why do you think that fixation is, from your own perspective, or why do you think that that fixation still exists, even after I don't know, like the boom period of those jobs have already passed?
Uh, wait, could you repeat that question again?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I probably said it in quite a convoluted way, but like,
Mhm.
why do you think that we're so like Asians are so fixated? Asians in general, be it Indian or any other part of the continent, be it in Malaysia or wherever else. Why do you think we're still fixated to those three careers being the careers of choice to this day?
I see. Uh, okay, I will speak from a Chinese person's perspective. Um, because Chinese people
Okay.
they really love money. So
Mm,
when yeah, when you get when people get sick, the first person they go to see is usually their doctor, right? At the hospital or even a
right.
clinic. And when they pay after you see the doctor, they give you your medication, and then you look at the bill, and then you're like, "Dang, that's pretty expensive." And I think based on because of that, Chinese people have gotten the idea of that a doctor would be able to earn a lot of money if they've seen like this many patients within a day. So
Mm,
I guess that contributes to why there's this fixation of Asian parents wanting their kids to be like doctors, stuff like that. And w- I could argue the same thing for for lawyers too, because if you have like a civil
mm,
case or a criminal case, the first person you'll see is your attorney, and you pay a lot for your attorney. So I believe that contributes to it. And then the other thing is that um, a lot of Chinese parents probably have no idea what doctors, uh, lawyers, and engineers actually do, in the sense that uh, they know that doctors see patients and then they try to treat them, but they don't understand the science or the how they do it, kind of the process of how they treat patients. They probably don't have a good understanding of it. They only know that this job gets you a lot of money, and that's all I care. And there's probably
mm,
a lot of other jobs that also get you that amount of money. But if you're if you look at a musician or um, any career in the creative industry, you there's like a lot of struggles that come with it. Uh, Say if you want to become a singer, you'd you'd have you'd have to work for it. And I think Chinese parents, they don't want their kids to struggle as much, and at the same time earn a lot of money, if that makes sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
but what for I guess what frustrates me is that you'd also struggle even if you're trying to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. I'd argue that you'd struggle a lot more getting into those careers than you do musicians or any career in the creative industry. So I guess
Mm.
that contributes to the fixation. What do you think, though?
Mm. Yeah, I definitely think that that plays a role. The sort of money that people make out of it, and I also think it's a bit of the sort of prestige that you get. Is prestige the right word? Like
Yeah,
your
yeah,
sort of
I'd
status
say
in
that's the right word.
society. Uh, yeah. Along with that, your status in society also goes a lot higher if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, or at least that's how it used to be before.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, to an extent, it still is today, I would say. So I think all of those things also factor in. But a part of me also does believe that parents are not necessarily just money minded about it. Of course, they do think about the money aspect of it. Not saying that they probably don't, but I think it also comes from the fact that they've seen those jobs to be the more secure jobs in the work in the field of a workplace environment. So I feel like that sense of it being a secure job where the cash flow is consistent
Hmm.
sort of also leads them to think that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just what I think about it. But do you feel like that also plays a role in it to an extent?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That definitely does play a role in it because you if you give them like a job that's not like doctor, lawyer, and engineer, they'll be like, "How are you gonna make a living?" You know, if you uh, if you want to open a restaurant, they'll probably look at you and then be like, "What if things go wrong?" You know, how are you gonna
Mm,
get stable financial income? But
yeah.
it's kind of the same thing for a doctor or lawyer or engineer. In the lawyer's case, if you lose a lot of cases, you probably won't get as much clients. You know.
Mm, yeah. 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 But I think that aspect of it being, or at least in their eyes, being a safe choice plays a huge role. Because after all, I don't think parents are like, I mean, sure, they might look at it from a materialistic perspective, but I do think that they also look at it from a perspective of wanting their kids to end up in a good place. So I feel like that also plays a role in that. But speaking of that sort of fixation with it that we still tend to have, I don't know if this is a problem in Malaysia, but or you could probably touch on this a little more. Has this sort of engineering workspace or the medicine workspace or the lawyer workspace reached a sense of saturation where there's just too many lawyers or too many engineers or too many doctors?
Um, on top of my head, I don't think we're at that point yet. But I think that if this
Mm,
continues on, it will definitely be saturated. I think as of now, there are probably a lot of people out there who are struggling to get a job in those three careers. as we're speaking. Um, it's just that competitive, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What
Because
about
a part of me
India?
does feel like in India we've reached that saturation. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just asking. What about India?
Oh yeah, I feel like we've reached that saturation point with engineering, or at least we're very close to it. Because I've heard of stories where engineers don't have proper jobs. They still end up relying on doing other things or taking up other careers. I mean, some for the better. They sort of, I guess, discover their interests and what actually keeps them going rather than doing engineering. So it has its pros and cons, of course. But yeah, I feel like it has reached a level of saturation, or it's at least almost there with engineering in mind. With medicine and lawyers, I'm not exactly sure, to be perfectly honest. Um, but yeah, part of me does also think that not every student who becomes a doctor, and this is nothing against doctors in general, because I mean, especially in the time that we're in, they're doing a lot for society. But not
Hmm.
every student who studies to become a doctor can become a good doctor, right? Like, and that is the part that worries me. Have you given some thought to that at all? Like, have you thought about that?
Um, I've I haven't really given that much thought, but um, I do agree. I do agree that not everyone um, who studies to be a doctor can become a real doctor, because not everyone's passionate for it, right? Some of them might be
Right.
forced by their parents to become a doctor just cause. And if you don't have the passion
Mm,
for it, it's difficult to do that job well. That's my take on it. Yeah.
mm. Do you think that a job like forensic science is viewed at the same level as a job in, be it engineering or medicine or being a lawyer?
Um, I feel like any science jobs, most of the science jobs that most of us hear of are probably up there in terms of like this prestigeness. Like if I go
Mm,
tell my relatives that I'm gonna become a DNA analyst, they would just one, they wouldn't understand what it was. Two, they would understand it to be like up there because
mm,
what they just don't have an idea of what it was, but they know that it's science, so they're like, okay, it's probably up there. Like, ooh, science is cool, but I have no idea what it is. You know?
mm, mm. Yeah, definitely. Because I think, especially taking this into consideration of how people, like a lot of people, are getting their kids to study in these three fields. Um, I remember having this conversation, I think, with my mom sometime back. This was probably a while back, about how, the workforce in general might have a bit of a problem in terms of not having plumbers, maybe, or, or electricians or things like that. Because um, if everybody is starting to become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, and this is not to necessarily say that those jobs are lower paying jobs or anything like that, but um, just that balance in society in terms of having people to sort of symbiotically exist by doing everything. It's, well, I don't think you can reach an exact balance, but you sort of reach an imbalance, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, what is your thought on that?
Um, I definitely have a lot of takes on this. So,
Oh, go for it by all means.
um, I've definitely given this a lot of thought. My take is that um, a lot of us contribute to the society in our own ways, and not everybody's going to contribute it the same way. And
Right.
with the imbalance, my thing is that if we have this many doctors and we don't have enough like singers, bands, uh, even artists, those careers are just gonna die out, and we probably won't be able to listen to um, Maroon Five or uh, Alec Benjamin's. We we won't even be able to enjoy movies, you know. So
Mm,
if these careers go to extinction, what kind of world are we gonna live in? You know, it's gonna be boring as hell
mm.
with doctors just going to bars and then be like, "Yo, what kind of patient you have today?" Like,
Yeah.
imagine what kind of conversation that would be. It's just boring. So,
Mm,
um, yeah.
yeah. But on the sort of bright side, you do see a lot of people our age nowadays, through the advent of social media, be it on Instagram or YouTube for that matter, like taking up their hobby of wanting to become or wanting to write some songs, or taking up that hobby of becoming a dancer, or not becoming a dancer, or like of dancing and things like that. Uh, do you think we're in that precipice of change, or do you think there's still a lot more for us to do to reach that point where every field or to reach that point where we're accepting of every field? Do you feel like we're close to it, or do you feel like there's a lot more for us to do?
Um, I feel like we're getting there. But yeah, we definitely still have a lot more to do. Especially convincing most of the Asian parents population that your kid's gonna turn out
Mm,
fine, no matter what the job they do. But I guess it also depends on their passion and dedication as well. Like if you don't work for it, it might not turn out as well for you. Like whatever job you have, you gotta work hard for it. Um,
mm.
Sorry, I heard someone from the outside.
No, no, you're good.
Okay. Where was I? Yeah, we definitely still have a lot more to do. Um, I think as part of the younger generation, I've gotten to the point where I'm just like I'm gonna do whatever I'm passionate about. Like my parents can't stop me.
Mm,
Like at the end of the day, it is my job,
mm,
and I have to be passionate about it. Like if I'm doing a job that I'm not passionate about it, I think I'll be very miserable, and I do not want to live a life like that. So I think
mm.
a lot of youngsters or youngsters. I feel like an old person saying that. I feel like a lot of young people have to realize that. Uh, I feel like a lot of people have to realize that it is just pursue your passion if you can. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah, very true. But this, when we were just mentioning that, this other thought popped up in my head. I don't know if you've been introduced to this idea in any way, but I listened to this podcast called the Charlie and Ben podcast. Uh,
Hmm.
it's these guys who run this channel called Charisma on Command. I'm
Hmm.
going to link the podcast and the page below for those of you interested. But I remember listening to one episode where they were talking about a cycle of the work environment. And I might just be butchering this, but I feel like they were talking about a book or talking about a writer or somebody who sort of explains this idea of how all of it is in cycles, in the sense that there is going to be a generation that works for survival, which is sort of like our parents' generation. Then there's going to be another generation where it's sort of like a mix of the two, where we're transitioning into that phase of doing what we're passionate about, and doing what makes us happy, but we're still sort of moving from that phase of like survival mode to
Mhm.
thriving mode, if you will, to then reaching a point where everybody's doing what they love, but at the same time, not everybody is making enough money, or not everybody is self sufficient to live in society. And then we pick back up again to where, because of that aspect of not being able to survive, people go into survival mode, and that cycle sort of repeats. Um, I might have just butchered this whole idea as I'm talking about it. To those of you listening, if this rings a bell, feel free to
Mhm.
mention what that is, in the comments on YouTube, um, or share it as a discussion comment on the Instagram page. But what do you think about that thought in general, as we're thinking or talking about it?
Um, I am only giving my opinion based on Prateek's comments.
Yeah.
I have not listened to that podcast,
Yes.
so um, in some sense that would be true because at the end of the day, each and every one of our lives are different. Some may turn out as we expected or how we wanted, and some may just turn out not as well. So if things turn out for you, that's great. If things don't turn out for you, if you have to go into survival mode, it, I don't think there's, I don't think you have to blame yourself for it. Um, it's just, it's just what you gotta do, right? Um,
Mm,
and there shouldn't be any blaming for like I've gotten myself into this situation because I got this job. Um,
right.
I just think that if you're happy at what you did, that's all that matters.
Mm, mm. Definitely. No, I definitely agree with what you said over there, because at the end of the day, when life ends, um, you're not going to go away with any money. You're going to go away with the thoughts that you've fostered in your mind, to the happiness that you had in this life, and so on. So definitely in the long run, in this long run of life, like from the perspective of playing the single player game, you sort of have to do something that makes you happy. But speaking of the
Mhm.
end of life, um, what is sort of the philosophy in your culture with regards to death and afterlife and happiness and all those sort of things?
Um,
I apologize if I didn't put that well enough, but I hope that question makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense. I'm just thinking about what our culture kind of thinks of death. I know we do believe in reincarnation in some way. Um, when
Mm,
my grandpa passed away, and we were visiting his grave. Uh, one
mm,
of There was this one butterfly that was flying, just flying around us, and then my mom just went like, "Hey, look, your grandpa's here," you know. Uh, so I thought that was cute.
yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Mm,
but also in some ways, we believe that they're just up in heaven enjoying the afterlife. Um, because we burn because in my culture we burn these little incest sticks or something like that, and we offer
mm,
uh, we offer food uh, as part of the ritual, and then as soon as that incense burns out, my parents would just be like, all right, they're done eating, we're good to go," something like that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
we also burn like these money looking papers. They actually have like the dollar signs on it, and we burn them believing that little that's the way to transport the money to the dead so they could somehow use it in the afterlife. um, I, there's a lot of things that we
Okay.
burn believing that it'll get sent to the dead. um,
Fascinating.
we've yeah, we've burned like a
Interesting.
paper house before with paper cars, stuff like that. Even paper
Huh.
Rolex, I think, like the watch,
Mm.
uh, believing that it'll be sent to the dead. And I don't necessarily believe in it. I just take I just take what my mom said. I just take it. Okay, mom, sure.
Mm. Mm. But that's interesting though, in terms of how, the belief is that, okay, if you burn something in this world, it'll, for the lack of a better word, it'll translocate to the afterlife or the other
Yeah.
planets, or however that philosophy or that culture looks at it. Because there's some things that are very similar to what you just said within, like, my culture, like from the part of the world that I'm from. I wouldn't
Hmm.
say that it's similar to all of India. I'd say this is more similar to the sort of area that I'm from, um, which is in, like, the coastal south of India. We also, like, during festivities, we tend to put out some food on a banana leaf, and we put it outside for the crows to come and eat, sort of as like an offering to those, like, our ancestors, if you will. And we don't eat until they come and eat. Like, we don't eat until the crows come and eat something, um, and things like that. And sometimes when,
Yeah.
like, because there's multiple dishes that people tend to make for these. There's like a certain vegetable and some, excuse me, and some beans and some sweet dish, or some, like, multiple dessert and all that sort of things. And if, like, a crow comes and eats something specific, that a certain dead person liked, a lot of the times we're like, oh, this person, see, they've come to eat this thing because that's their favorite thing, that's what they liked, or that's what they loved eating while they were, alive. So it's just fascinating to sort of see that, and, like, or sort of, yeah, or how all those things came into play. um
Hmm.
because, from reading the this is probably going into a different tangent, but from reading into the Bhagavad Gita, like, for as much, like, because I haven't been able to finish it, but so far whatever I've read suggests that afterlife also sort of depends on our, like, karma and our actions of this life. And sort of,
Hmm.
if you become a better human being in your next generation, or if you drop down to becoming an animal. So all of those sort of thoughts I just find conflicting. But anyway, we don't need to go into a rabbit hole about
Yeah.
that. I just wanted to share something else that was really fascinating about, uh, so there's also this other thing in our culture where if a bachelor, like a man who hasn't been married, passes away,
Hmm.
uh, for the peace of his soul, there's a ritual performed where, the family has to go looking for the soul of a dead woman who died unmarried. So they sort of
Hmm.
perform a ritual where the two souls are married for the peace of both souls. So yeah, I heard that and I was like, wow, like, how deep can this get? Like, is there something within your culture that's so deep that you find fascinating or interesting or just curious in some way?
Um, listening to that, that definitely does sound interesting. Um, I don't think in my, I don't think there's, I don't think something like that exists in my culture. Maybe it does. I just have no idea of it, but it definitely is a theory. Uh, it's something to think about. I
Mm,
guess I'll put it that way.
mm. Yeah, because I mean, um, again, this is probably going into a different tangent, but this world that we live in is quite metaphysical. Like there are a lot of things that we don't know, like and I'm personally a believer in also the fact that science can't necessarily explain everything. Or, well, let me rephrase that by saying I don't think science has discovered everything just yet.
Yeah.
To put it more succinctly. But speaking of that, again, this is I apologize for taking a hard turn. But do you believe in aliens?
Um, I I do. Um, I don't
Okay.
have any actual evidence to back it up, but the fact that in
Mm,
this in this gigantic universe, we exist as living beings on on it's not just humans. Like you've got all these animals, you got all these bacteria, you got all these plants on Earth. I definitely do think that aliens exist. Like if we are able to exist on one planet in this very gigantic universe with so many planets and stars, there definitely is a chance for the existence of aliens outside of Earth. So,
mm, and when did you open yourself up to this thought, to the fact that aliens might possibly exist?
um, probably from some conspiracy theories. I don't. Uh, my idea is based on some conspiracy theories, but not. I don't necessarily believe in all those conspiracy theories because you see some conspiracy
Mm-hmm.
theories. They're like they give you this picture of, and then they zoom into this little speck, and it kind of resembles like a UFO or something like that. Not in that way. Not in that way.
Yeah.
Um, I just think I just think that it probably started when I actually took a philosophy class in college, and
Mm,
because in philosophy it kind of encourages you to think deeply into simple things. So um,
yeah.
when I think deeply into things like that, I don't know. At one point, I started to
Mm-hmm.
think about the existence of aliens, but I sort of like use my knowledge in science to kind of like infer or maybe reason that there is a chance of aliens existing. I'm not saying that definitely is. I'm just saying like
Mm,
um, based on our the chance of us existing, there probably is a chance of living things existing on another planet. It's just that we haven't got to them yet. So
mm,
yeah.
mm.
What What about you? When have you
That
do,
that's
do
fair.
you
That's
think
fair.
do you think aliens exist?
Um, so pretty much like you, like I haven't done my own research to sort of know if aliens exist, but
Hmm.
I do believe a lot like you that if we're on this planet, it's it's not impossible, or no, it's not impossible for there to be a similar planet someplace else. Like sure, like there have been certain satellites that have orbited around some planets or anything like that, but this there's a lot more left to be discovered in space. So who's to say that there isn't something identical to us, or something that's even a better version of us living in some other galaxy or whatever it might be? So yeah, no, I definitely do sort of believe that there is something out there in space that we're not entirely aware of, or even if some of us are, we tend to believe that it's not true, or whatever, for whatever reason, but no, I do believe a lot like you, um, that they probably do exist. um, Recently I was talking to somebody, and this is related to aliens, so it's not a tangent, but they were talking about the possibility of, oh, before I say this, um, I forget, uh, are you a religious person or are you not? I mean, if you don't want to
I would
share, that's
say
fine, but
that's fine. That's fine. I'm okay sharing it. Um, I'm in the middle in the sense that
okay.
I don't necessarily believe that God exists, but at the same
Okay.
time, like if I, you know how people are scared of ghosts and uh, those kinds of things. I
Mm,
I bel I don't necessarily believe that ghosts exist, but I will not test it if that makes sense. So kind of the same thing with
mm,
God.
mm, mm. Right.
Yeah, like
I see.
maybe he's
Okay.
there,
Fair.
maybe he's there. I just couldn't see it.
Mm,
You know? Yeah.
mm. Gotcha. Um, the reason I asked that is because I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about this theory which blew my mind. I didn't necessarily think about it as much, but or before that, but after they mentioned it, I was like, okay, that's sort of like an interesting thought. But they were talking about the possibility of gods being aliens, like what we see as gods actually being aliens. So I was like, wait a second, what? Like, because, like, the manner in which, like, this person broke it down, they were saying things like, so yeah, we sort of believe that they come in these clouds into this planet, and they sort of like do their thing, um, yada yada yada. And like this person was drawing parallels to how a cloud was probably a spaceship, and how these sort of features that this being had, that we see as God, as actually being those features of an alien, and how humans at that point in time, when these aliens came to this planet, were not necessarily aware of the fact that, or they weren't necessarily knowledgeable enough to sort of describe these things, because they probably weren't aware about it. So yeah, that, like, this person mentioning that just sort of boggled my mind in a lot of ways, because if you come to think of it, like, because I'm personally, I am a religious person. So like, thinking about it, being like, oh wait, are we just worshipping aliens who are living in a different dimension? It just sort of blew my mind. I mean, not to say that I entirely am like, okay, yeah, that person is saying the truth. I don't know, but it's just a perspective that's out there. So it just sort of blew my mind. But from the perspective of someone who's in the middle, uh, what do you think about that angle?
Um, it definitely is an interesting thought, or even theory, I would suppose. Um,
Mm,
I could totally see this breaking our world in the sense that, like, if this was actually true, a lot of people on the, I
mm,
bet that a lot of people on the planet would just be like, you know, just you're gonna
yeah,
break them. But I don't know about that. I maybe sure true. Uh,
Mm,
there, I mean, there's no way for us to find out about that. But if it was true,
right. Right.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to add on to that. I just think that it's an interesting one.
Mm, yeah, no, it definitely is. And after this person said that, I was like, that's it's something that we don't think about, right? Because at least, I mean, I don't know. Again, you said that you're not necessarily a religious person, you're in between. A lot of the times, I think as kids, we're sort of brought up in a certain faith because our families believe in those faiths. And but once you reach a certain age, you sort of go on this path of self discovery where you're actually sort of figuring out what God means to you or what it doesn't mean to you, or if if he exists or if he doesn't exist. And to each their own, like everybody has their own opinion, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't believe, you don't believe. Fair enough.
Hmm.
There's nothing I can do to there's nothing anybody like a religious person can do to sort of change somebody's opinion if they don't want to change it. But this angle of aliens being gods was just, yeah, it just sort of um, threw me off for a moment. I was like, huh. Because again, I think at the bottom of it all, it comes down to questioning the belief that you have, right? Because at
Yeah.
least for me as a religious person, I would never believe that gods are aliens. But then now this person is proposing this or sharing their perspective of, okay, gods are maybe aliens. So that leads to us questioning our belief system in a lot of ways. And sometimes you're just not open enough to actually taking the question as is. So, sort of connecting the dots and like furthering this into that concept of questioning one's own belief, why do you think it is that we're afraid of, or I guess afraid is not the right word, but why do you think we're not open to being, or why do you think we're not open to having our belief system being questioned? And it doesn't have to be a religious
Um.
belief system. It could be anything, because there's a lot of things that we believe in.
Yeah. Um. I think humans in general we're just not that good with change. A lot of us like to have
Mm,
things stay the way it is because with change, there's a lot that you would have to sort of work on yourself to change. So,
mm,
um, so we could argue about that in our political system. So you have the conservatives and
mm,
the liberals. Um, the conservatives, they um, generally don't want that many immigrants in the U.S. And then the liberals, they're okay
right.
with having immigrants in the U.S. Um, Never mind. I don't know where I was going with that. Uh,
It's all good. No worries.
um, I've lost my train of thought. But I'm just saying, like humans in general suck with change because there's a lot of things to adapt to.
Mm,
Um, Recently, I've had a close friend of mine. Um, she she has uh, two names. So first name was Sophia, the
mm,
middle name was Josephine, right? And uh, at first, like few years back, she decided to be called. She decided that she wants to be called Sophia. So everyone around her calls her Sophia. Um, And recently, she decided that she wanted to change her middle name to Josephine. She wants to be addressed as Josephine. So everyone around her
Mm,
has to, has to address her as Josephine instead of Sophia from now on. And within that transition period, you can
right.
see people just either uh, forgetting that, oh, I should address her as Josephine now instead of Sophia, right? So minor things like that. And then
Mm,
I've probably gone off a weird tangent with that. Prior,
it's
well,
all
based
good.
on your question, but yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree in a lot of ways because I think we're in a lot of ways like there's this mental block to where we're resistant to change. In a
Hmm.
lot of ways, and I think we also live in a generation where like if somebody questions our beliefs, we tend to get offended because we look at it as a personal attack rather than it actually being the person just questioning the origin of those beliefs rather, if that makes any sense, because I think a
Yeah,
lot of the
yeah,
times we tend to attach our belief to our own identity, which sure, I mean, it
hmm,
makes you, well, my belief system is that of Hinduism, so yes, it makes me a Hindu. But if somebody was to come up to me and say, oh, all Hindus suck, y'all don't eat beef, y'all suck, something like that, like, I mean, that is so mundane and so childish. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to my mind, but anyway, um that's sort of like an attack on my belief system, sure. But
hmm,
um I think those can be separated in a way, like just because somebody is challenging your um belief system doesn't necessarily mean, or it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to attack you. you know it
yeah,
can just be them just genuinely questioning where
yeah,
these things originate from, because I feel
yeah,
like we're sort of easily offended now. And I mean, I'm guilty.
hmm,
I'm probably guilty of it too in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's sort of
yeah,
understanding that there's a lot more to it than just being than somebody who asks a question just trying, or just asking the question with the intention of offending you. So yeah, that's just how I personally feel about it. But I also feel that we should have somebody challenge our opinions or challenge our belief system, because that will help us find some
yeah,
more answers as to why we're doing
yeah,
or why we're following it. So yeah.
yeah. I feel like with people questioning your belief system, it kind of helps you understand your religion a lot more than you previously did,
Mm,
because um,
right.
you would actually go find out like why is it this way? Why do you believe it? Why do you believe? Why do you have such beliefs? You know, um, uh,
Yeah.
I think that we should not be afraid to have other people questioning your belief, but there is also a fine line between
Mm,
being genuinely curious and then just being a prick. So if
right.
if you're being a prick, that's just not right. If you're being a prick, so there's that.
Right. Mm. No, you make a fair point there, because I think there's always that sort of uh side. There's always more than a side, right? It's not just, not everybody who's questioning your belief system is genuinely curious. They could just coming from a place of wanting to attack you for the beliefs that you have. And it doesn't have to be just about religion, it could be about anything. Like it possibly could be about your belief in the moon landing, if like Neil Armstrong actually landed on the moon. Like, because I don't know. Yeah, like 'cause this is the other thought I had in my head while we were talking about it, but I'll
Hmm.
transition into that once I sort of mention this. Is that I feel like irrespective of it being religion, whatever we tend to believe in, if somebody sort of questions it, um, I think we live in a world where we take it as a personal attack now. While we should try and not take it as a personal attack, even if somebody is trying to attack you. Um, and I think we can control how we respond to that attack or that genuine curiosity. So yeah,
Yeah,
I guess it's just coming to grips to that fact, and it's not easy, but it's definitely
yeah,
attainable. So yeah.
yeah. It's definitely not easy because um, we're emotional beings, and if you
Yeah.
take if you take questioning your belief as a personal attack, you would definitely kind of lose your usual logical sense or even logical thought. S- So that kind of that makes it difficult, and I guess at some point you would have to tell yourself that, oh, this person is he's just curious about what my belief is all about, and um, you should not be afraid to answer those questions.
Hmm. Totally, totally. And now that I've mentioned the moon landing, since you brought up the aspect of conspiracy theories, I think it'd be a nice note for us to sort of close this section of the podcast talking about conspiracy theories because I kind of tend to find them fascinating. So, first question:
Mhm.
do you think the moon landing is true? Do you think that they actually landed on the moon?
Sorry, you got cut off a little. What was your question?
Oh no, you're good. My question was, do you think that Neil Armstrong actually landed on the moon?
I mean, yeah, like he
Yeah.
did. Like, what? How much effort would you have to do? Like, I feel like this to stage the moon landing. It there's been there's
Mm-hmm.
it would have to take so much effort to stage the moon landing. You know what I mean? There's so much effort
Mm.
that people thinking that it wasn't true. I mean, I definitely think they did land. Neil Armstrong did land on the moon, and it was not staged. Oh God.
Mm. The reason why I'm asking this is because I clearly remember this happening
Mm,
in junior year of high school. At least that's how people over here would look at it. But back home, I was in like the 11th grade, and our physics professor, uh, I forget why this topic came up, but it came up for some reason.
mhm.
And those of my classmates who are listening to this are probably going to remember this incident. But he basically went on to sort of explain everything about like, oh, this is why it's fake. It was they closed off a facility somewhere in Texas, and I might be getting some of the facts wrong, and I apologize, or at least the parts of the story that I was told rather. Uh, and I apologize if I'm getting any of these wrong, but basically he was mentioning that it was done someplace. It was staged. Basically, all he was saying was that it was staged, and that it was done in a certain location in the United States itself. Um, and like when you put two and two together, because a lot of it also had to play a role in terms of like the space race, because at that time the USSR and the US had like this competition going on in terms of who's gonna reach the moon first, who's gonna go to space first, and so on. So, like, this argument of it being staged to sort of accelerate that, I guess, journey of going to the moon, if you will. I really don't know. I really don't know if I believe either. I don't know if I believe the story that it's staged, or if I believe that they actually landed on the moon. But yeah, I
I
don't know, because that was the reason why I was just curious to know what you thought about that.
yeah. Um, I'm taking this as like a, you know how in science you have the null hypothesis and then you have the alternative hypothesis. Uh, the null hypothesis being
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you originally believed, and then the alternative hypothesis is your other theory that you want to test against the null hypothesis. I'm taking my approach to
Mm-hmm.
this is based on that. So my null hypothesis is that uh, they did Neil Armstrong did land on the moon, and the evidence is just based on
Right.
NASA's picture and everything, because we trust them. To We trust that we've paid you well, America. We trust that Americans paid their tax money to fund NASA into landing on the moon. And we've had
Mm.
pictures, right? We have pictures of them landing on the moon. So our null hypothesis is based on that.
Right.
And then you look at the alternative hypothesis. Uh, it's that NASA staged the whole moon landing thing, and a lot of a lot of the
Yeah.
a lot of the quote unquote evidence provided by these conspiracy theories, I feel like they most of them are just I forgot what the word for it is, but most of these quote unquote evidence are not definitive. They're more like um,
Mm.
they're more like inferred in the sense that you are making something out of this particular circumstance, if that makes sense. I don't. They actually have a word.
Mm.
They actually have the term for that in court. I just don't remember what the term was on top of my head. But they most of the evidence by these conspiracy theories are just not definitive enough. Like you have, if they're
Mm.
based on what your uh, teacher was it physics teacher?
Yeah, my physics teacher
Oh, okay,
in 11th
okay,
standard. Yeah.
yeah. Based on what he said, he suggested that all of this was staged, right? So my question to that is, like, how do you know? Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
you definitively know? Like, what is your like proof?
Mm.
Because all of everything that you suggested to
Mm.
me right now is just dang, I really wanted that word, but they're just
Is it testimonial? Is that the word that you're looking for?
mm, not testimonial, but like, yeah, what's the word for it? You know how when an attorney, so say the prosecutive attorney is making like an inference statement based on
Mm.
uh, what the testifier said, and then the defense would probably say something like uh, rejection. Uh, the prosecution is, dang it, is making a story based on what the person said. Like, I forgot what the word was, but something like that.
Yeah, it escapes my mind too. I can't remember.
Yeah, but
Huh.
uh, overall, just not definitive evidence. Like, not in those
Mm.
evidence are not enough to convince me that it's all staged. Is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And that's a fair argument. I can't remember if he mentioned any evidence, because it was a while back. I think at that
Hmm.
point, the fact that he mentioned it was just mind blowing more than anything. So I probably didn't
Hmm.
pay attention to the evidence that he was talking about. But this is probably my last question before we transition into the latter stages of the podcast. But are there any conspiracy theories that you believe to be true, or do you see, or do you sort of assess them and see, or maybe wonder for them to possibly be true?
Um, Let me think. I think I've only know three conspiracy theories so far. The flat Earth theory,
Mm,
the anti-vax theory, and then the fake moon landing theory. Um, I think I've only heard of those three.
mm,
Um, from what I so based this is my ranking for what I really like sort of believe, but not really. Um, my first would be
yeah.
um, okay. My first would be okay. I'm saying this, but I do not like actually believe on any of these theories. Like I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not I'm not a flat
Yeah.
earther. I'm not I'm not any of those. I'm just saying like I'm just saying this based on like the actual possibility. I would say flat Earth, and the first one would be flat Earth. The second
Mm,
one would be the moon landing, and then the third one would be anti-vax. Flat Earth only flat Earth is only
mm,
because if you look at our world right now, it just happens to look it just happens to look flat. But we, as a person who
mm,
studied science, I know that is definitely not true because it only appears flat because um, there's like a lot of phenomenons that are going on at the same time that which makes it look like it's flat. And I'm not even going to get into the details about how flat earthers try to do these little experiments to try to prove to us that the Earth is flat. I'm not even going to get into that, but um, yeah,
yeah.
there's that. I Out of these three, flat Earth would be the most possible, but in the real world sense, it's no, I do not believe in it. It's lack of a better word. It's very dumb. That's my take on it. Like,
Mm, mm.
yeah. Um, I
Fair
just
enough.
think that all of these conspiracy theories are just based on very poor presenting of evidence in trying to um, support a theory. You know.
Mm, mm, mm. That's a nice way to put it. That's definitely a nice way to put it. Because, yeah, like a lot of these conspiracy theories don't necessarily have, or don't necessarily tend to have enough evidence to back them up. So I definitely see where you're coming from that sense. So, yeah, honestly, before we started recording this episode, I didn't expect us to end up in talking about conspiracy theories, aliens,
Neither do I.
gods being aliens, and so on. But yeah, but I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed having this conversation so far.
I, I definitely did. It was an interesting conversation.
Cool, cool. I'm glad. So we're going to transition into the latter stages of this podcast, starting off with the word association game that we play called Bish Bash Bosh, where
Hmm.
I basically give guests five different words to which they have
Hmm.
to respond to them in three words or three phrases. You've probably seen these videos on Instagram, but basically, I'll give you a word and then you have to respond to it in three different words. So, for example, if I was to say, science, what are the three things that come to your mind? that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. So the first word for the segment of Bish Bash Bosh is differences. What comes to your mind when I say the word differences?
Um, I think of understanding. I think of
Mm,
subtle, as in like subtle differences, and
mm.
yeah, I think those two words are the things that came up to my mind. Couldn't come up with a third one.
Gotcha. No worries, it's all good. The second
Mm,
one is, or the second word rather, is nuance. What comes to your mind when I say the word nuance?
I think of quirks. Oddly enough, like quirks.
Mm, mm, gotcha. What comes to your mind when I say the word learning?
I think of interesting, um, never ending, and um, and another thing is that there, even even with something that's you think that you're not going to learn anything from, like a job, you're like, uh, I don't think I'm going to learn anything from this job. But when you actually go take the job, you're like, oh, there's actually some things that I can learn. So probably unexpected is the word I'm looking for. So
Okay,
that.
I like it. I like it. The fourth word is empathy. What comes to your mind when I say the word empathy?
Mm, when I think about empathy, I think about putting myself in other people's shoes, and it can be
Mm,
difficult because sometimes it's hard to picture yourself in other people's shoes and what they're experiencing. Um,
mm,
but also, you'd have to understand, just like in differences. But I hate to
mm.
use it again, but understand.
That's all good. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for the last word, what comes to your mind when I say the word similarities?
Um, I think about culture differences. Not really culture differences, but
Mm-hmm.
different cultures in general. There's like a few similar
Mm-hmm.
differences. Just like earlier, what you said about
Mm.
that you guys have offerings to the crows, but we have offerings to our ancestors or
Yeah.
uh, different different gods or something like that. So there's a different similarities some that come with it that come with different cultures. And another thing I've recently learned about is uh, the southern chicken and dumpling dish in the U.S. is almost the same.
Hmm.
Can also be the same with the Korean suchebi, which is which is a hand in in literal translation. I think it's called hand pulled and or hand taught dough soup. Because in chicken and dumplings you have
Hmm.
like the dough, and then in the Korean suchebi,
Yeah.
the soup, you also do the same thing but with other ingredients. So there's things like that.
Fascinating. I don't think somebody has used food as a reference for similarities, but that's awesome. That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. And that's what makes us like unique, right? In terms of our thoughts. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you sharing that. So thank you so much for playing along. on this
Hmm.
segment of Bish Bash Bosh. Just a couple more questions. Well, the last one's not really a question, but the first one is how do you relate to people?
How do I relate to people? Um, in what sense,
Yeah,
if I may ask?
I leave this to be open to
Leave
your own
this to me.
interpretation. What, yeah,
Okay.
what is relating to people
Uh,
to you? And then, Circa, how do you relate to people?
mm, so when I think about relating to people, um, I think I think about us facing or going through similar experiences. So, uh,
Mm,
like as a student, you have like deadlines and assignments or stuff like that, and a lot of students are also broke at the same time. So, being broke, you can also like talk to other people about being broke, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm going through the same thing too." Like, uh, you just get on the conversation and keep on going with that. I guess that's how I relate to people is to not I'm not like
mm,
trying out of my way to like find things that I can relate to. It's just that sometimes when things come up in the conversation, I'll be like, oh yeah, I feel that too. I can definitely relate, and or like, oh, I've definitely been through that. So, um,
mm,
but I guess at the end of it, if it's a difficult situation and I've like relate to it, I try to help them if I can, within my abilities as well.
mm, mm. Beautiful, beautiful. um and yeah, I mean, that is what relating is, right? Like the fact that you people can connect to each other based off of similar experiences or sort of learnings and things like that. So that's awesome. For the last question, which is not really a question, I'd like for you to leave the listeners and the watchers with a positive thought or anything that keeps you going, whatever it may be. The floor is yours.
Mm. um, dang. Um, I would say whatever you're going through right now, just know that things for most of the time will work out for you, even if it looks very difficult. And I'd say don't give up. Um, and always try to do something that can help you develop yourself even more, or even try to understand yourself even more. Because I think
Mm,
it'll be helpful down the line. Um, just, I'll just quote what uh, Dory from Finding Nemo said. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Yeah. I think I'll leave. I think I'll leave you all with that.
okay, that is awesome. From talking about forensic science to talking about aliens, conspiracy
Yeah.
theories, God, and much more, to closing off with Dory
Mhm.
from Finding Nemo. This has been great for me personally. So thank you so much for joining me, Desmond. I really appreciate it. And I hope that
Mhm.
all the listeners and watchers got something from this as well. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for watching and listening, or listening
Yeah.
rather.
Thank you for having me,
And
Prateek.
until next time, we'll see you guys later. Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you for watching this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. Make sure to follow Desmond on his social media accounts and mention in the comment section below some of your thoughts about the conspiracy theories we discussed on this episode and so much more. Make sure to also check the description box below for other sources of information and content that we've talked about today. Like this video, share it around, and subscribe to the channel, and make sure to hit the bell icon to never miss another episode. If you've made it this far, thank you once again. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to these episodes and join in on the conversation. If you have stayed till the end, I really just want to say thank you and give you all a shout out. So make sure to DM me if you are listening to this part so that I know that you are, and I'll give you guys a shout out on our Instagram page. But other than that, until next time, stay safe, take care, and don't forget to keep your mind open to different perspectives, because you never know, random relatability might just be around the corner.